All right, we're about to dive into something truly fascinating. We're going to explore a collection of ancient writings that, for the most part, get left out of the mainstream conversation. These are the so-called hidden books of the Bible. So get ready, because this is a journey into a really compelling and, yes, sometimes controversial corner of religious history. So let's just start with a pretty big question. What if the Bible that you're familiar with, the one on the bookshelf, isn't actually the whole story? What if there are missing pieces to a much larger, more complex puzzle? Well, the answer to that question really lies in these texts known as the Apocrypha. And I love this analogy. Think of them as the deleted scenes of the biblical narrative. These are writings from a really crucial window of time, and they reveal so much about how early Christian and Jewish thought was actually developing. Now, to really understand these texts, we've got to understand the world they came from. And believe me, this wasn't a quiet time. It was a period of absolutely incredible change, of conflict, and of course, the birth of a brand new faith. So, these apocryphal texts are written over this really pivotal 350-year span. You have the Christian movement, right? It's just getting started, sparked by the life and death of Jesus, and as it begins to spread, it starts bumping up against established Jewish groups and, of course, Roman influences. This whole situation created this fertile and, often pretty contentious ground for all sorts of new ideas and debates to pop up. And this is what leads us to one of the most fascinating things about the Apocrypha. It shows us that early Christianity wasn't this single, unified thing. No way. It was a wide, vibrant, and sometimes really contradictory spectrum of beliefs. And this right here really gets to the heart of some of those early debates about Christology, which is just, the study of the nature of Jesus himself. Well, a lot of people were starting to form the view of Jesus as a singular divine figure. You had texts like the Pistis Sophia that offered a totally different vision. In their view, Jesus was more of a mystical guide, a being with both human and divine qualities who was here to share this deep spiritual knowledge. So what does that really mean? It means the Pistis Sophia cracks open a window into a much more esoteric, kind of mystical side of early Christianity. It really emphasized gnosis, which is this idea of secret spiritual knowledge being the true path to salvation. And as you can imagine, this was a direct challenge to what would eventually become the mainstream traditional Christian doctrine. And the challenges didn't stop there. Take the Gospel of Mary, for instance. This text is radical for how it puts Mary Magdalene right in the center, in a position of spiritual leadership. It describes her as a prophet, someone who was recognized by the other apostles. It's just a really powerful and totally alternative vision of the role of women in the early church. Okay, so moving beyond all those internal debates, the Apocrypha also shines a huge spotlight on one of the most complex relationships in religious history, the one between the brand new Christian faith and its parent, Judaism. You can really see two sides of that coin in these texts. On one hand, you've got books like Tobit and the Wisdom of Solomon that are so deeply rooted in Jewish tradition, and they show a clear shared heritage. But then, on the other hand, you have texts like 2 Baruch and 4 Maccabees, and these highlight the growing pains, the theological tensions that were building as Christianity started to carve out its own separate identity.
Ultimately, what all these different texts show us is a community that's right in the middle of a pretty profound identity crisis. They were seriously wrestling with the question, how do we honor our Jewish roots while at the same time building this new, unique faith that's centered on Christ? It's a tough question.
But here's the kicker. This isn't just ancient history. The ideas and the debates that are packed inside these 2,000-year-old writings, they never really went away. In fact, they've been echoing through the halls of theology for centuries. Seriously, these were not just dusty old scrolls that got locked away and forgotten. The questions they raised about the nature of God, the role of women, what happens in the afterlife, these became central battlegrounds in the development of Christian thought for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Just think about the legacy here. The big debates over Jesus' divinity were shaped by the stark contrast between texts we all know, like the Gospel of John, and these apocryphal ones like the Pistis Sophia. A lot of our popular ideas about angels and demons, they were heavily, and I mean heavily, influenced by the Book of Enoch. And the ongoing conversation we still have today about women in church leadership, well, it finds some of its most ancient roots in texts just like the Gospel of Mary.
So we end right where we began, with a question. By looking at these deleted scenes, we get a much deeper, more nuanced picture of how Christianity was actually formed. It really makes you wonder, if these books offer a richer, more complex picture of our history, what pieces of the story, what important perspectives are we losing when we just leave them behind? Something to think about.